After 14 long years, the time has finally come again to re-enter the Dark Portal to face off against Illidan Stormrage and the Burning Legion. Wait a second, this doesn't look right. Why are these heroes here and why are there orcs all around? Hold on, this is the wrong Dark Portal, isn't it? Sorry about that, let's try this again. So, Burning Crusade Classic is almost upon us, and I'm sure many of you are very excited to be able to step through the Dark Portal once again to do battle with the demonic legions and Illidan's forces. And to assist you on your journey, and having played Burning Crusade extensively when it first came out, here are my top 5 tips for maximum gold making while leveling up and beyond to give you just the edge you'll need. And with that, sit back, relax, and let's get started with the video. So the very first topic I want to cover is reputations, because with the Burning Crusade being such a reputation heavy expansion, there are actually a lot of items that you can farm to fuel those reputations that you can also sell for a profit. At the beginning of the expansion, players, especially hardcore players, are going to be rushing to raise their reputation because heroic dungeons namely are going to be locked behind revered across many different factions, and these dungeons are important because later on they'll actually be used for attunement with the Karazhan raid and other raids as well. And not only that, but there are quite a few powerful items and recipes locked behind reputations, making the Burning Crusade truly a very reputation heavy expansion. And now when it comes to making gold with this, there are several factions that come with farmable reputation tokens that you can also then sell for gold. And the first of these is the Cenarion Expedition, for which you can farm unidentified plant parts from various mobs all around Zangar Marsh, and so I definitely recommend farming for at least a little bit in this zone, especially towards the early 60s. By the way, for any of these farmable rep tokens, I highly recommend selling them first on the auction house to the most hardcore players for a premium, and then buying them back for a cheaper price if and when you actually need that reputation. Next, another faction and item that you should look out for is the Lower City faction located in Shattered City, and the Erakoa feather item that drops off of the various Erakoa, as the name implies, all across the Terracard forest zone. This is the main area you'll be leveling up in the mid-60s, so you definitely want to make a note of any of the Erakoa mobs or related quests that you come across. Moving on, we actually have a couple of more vanity item related factions, and that is the Kuranai and the Mag'har in the Nagrand zone. And for these factions, you want to farm the obsidian warbeads that drop from the ogres all around Nagrand. By the way, since these factions, again it's the Kuranai for the Alliance and the Mag'har Orcs for the Horde, they largely provide cosmetic rewards, namely the Talbuk epic mounts. These warbeads may not end up being as high in demand, especially at the beginning, compared to some of the other reputation items that will actually allow people to unlock heroic instances for progression. Next up though, for these next two factions, one of which you're actually going to be pledging your allegiance to once you first set foot into Shattrath City, we have the Aldor and Scryer factions, which although you can only earn reputation with one of them at a time, you can still very well obtain and farm and sell reputation tokens for both factions. And first, for the Aldor, any demon creature in Outland will drop some of the reputation tokens, such as the Mark of Kil'jaeden and Mark of Sargeras, that you can also then sell on the auction house. And by the way, the significance of these factions is not to unlock certain heroic dungeons or to collect epic items, but rather for the shorter enchants that they uniquely provide. Anyhow, moving on to the Scryers, you can collect reputation tokens from any non-horde Blood Elf enemies in Outland. And one more thing I need to mention is that turning in any of these demon or blood elf tokens will actually count in half of the reputation towards the Shattar faction, which is actually another important faction for unlocking heroic dungeons and also epic items. So this will actually add additional value to any of these tokens that you obtain. And as for which tokens to actually prioritize between the Aldor and the Scryers, generally speaking, and because people are going to be more optimized for Classic, the Aldor faction seems to have an edge over the Scryers for most specs. But at the end of the day, the prices of these tokens will still depend largely on your server, so be sure to just check to see which one will be better to farm. And lastly, there's just one more faction I want to quickly mention, and that's Sporagar, and its rewards are generally not that significant, but because its rep tokens as well as the currency used to purchase its items, known as Glowcap, are all from the western Zangar Marsh, that means you can actually double dip on rep tokens for both the Cenarion Expedition, namely the unidentified plant parts from mobs all over Zangar Marsh, as well as the fertile spores from the spore bats in the zone, and then the Glowcap that you can find mostly on the western side of the zone. And with that, moving on to our second gold making tip, we have farming moats from elementals all throughout Outland. And the reason that these elemental moats, which can actually be combined into so-called primals, are going to be so valuable is that they're going to be used by virtually every crafting profession to craft high-end items. And to farm them, simply look out for any elemental creatures in Outland, and especially in some of the higher level zones like the Netherstorm and Shadowmoon Valley. And in terms of what exactly to farm while leveling up, I would definitely recommend doing Zangar Marsh for a lot of the low 60s for the rep tokens mainly. Then I would head over to Terracar Forest where you'll be able to find some Erakoa feathers. And then I would head over to Blade's Edge Mountain for just a little bit where there are some fire elementals apparently. And lastly, you should be able to hit max level in Shadowmoon Valley and or Netherstorm where there are plenty of elementals for you to farm. And with that, moving on to our third tip, which is some notable profession opportunities. First of all, I want to highlight blacksmithing, which is going to be able to craft some very powerful weapons at the beginning of the expansion. Now, these recipes I'm showing you right now are actually not accurate because these are the Mists of Pandaria redos of those weapons. But to that point, the reason that they were re-released in Mists of Pandaria is that they were very popular weapons back in TBC. And one of the main reasons for this is the release of Arena, for which you don't actually have to do any PvE to be able to earn these weapons. And again, all these weapons will require many of those primal elemental items we just discussed to craft, and so you can actually consider saving some for yourself if you're going to be crafting one of these weapons. By the way, these weapons are bind on pickup, but you can still very well make gold off of the materials that are required. And if you're a melee class, you should definitely consider taking up blacksmithing yourself for access to some very powerful weapons early on. But if you're more interested in making gold, another potentially more effective profession for doing that would be tailoring. Now, as a tailor, you can actually specialize into being able to craft a specific type of bind on pickup set, such as for shadow damage, for healing, or other types of elemental damage. And not only that, but you'll also be able to craft all 3 of the specialty cloth, although the one you specialize in, you'll be able to craft 2 at a time. And each of these is on a non-shared, nearly 4-day cooldown and can be sold on the auction house. And because of this time gating, these cloths are going to be low effort cooldowns to maintain and should be able to fetch you decent profits every time due to their scarcity. And speaking of low maintenance yet profitable professions, another one that I highly recommend would be alchemy. First of all, as a Burning Crusade alchemist, you can actually pick between 3 different specializations: Potion Mastery, Elixir Mastery, or Transmutation Mastery. And each specialization gives you a chance to proc 2 or even multiple items of the category of items that you specialize in. Personally, back in the original Burning Crusade, I was an Elixir Master and I really enjoyed it because flasks actually count as elixirs, and so I was actually making a lot of gold just by crafting flasks. But if you want something even lower maintenance, you can definitely consider Transmutation Mastery instead, especially since the Transmute Primal Might is going to be extremely profitable and high in demand. However, one thing to definitely note is that these mastery quests and specializations were not introduced into the original Burning Crusade until patch 2.2, which I'm not sure if that's going to be the case for Classic. But even without them, I still believe alchemy will be very good, especially for the transmutes. And now the next quick tip is somewhat of a more basic one, but nonetheless it's still important, and that is taking 2 gathering professions, especially at the beginning of the expansion, can be a decent way to get a lot of gold, especially early on and up front. Even the secondary professions, fishing and by extension cooking, can be quite good, especially if you have downtime, for example while you're waiting for a group to form. And real quick, on to tip number 4, and still actually on the topic of professions, we have jewel crafting, which is going to be the new profession with TBC. And now because it's a completely new profession, although it did technically come out with the pre-patch, that means that fewer players are going to actually have jewel crafting leveled and actually ready to go for Burning Crusade compared to all the other older professions. And thus, if you're one of those few players, you're going to likely have less competition for jewel crafting, or you can actually consider buying up a lot of the materials used for leveling up jewel crafting, which are the old world materials, and you can also flip them as well. And finally, last but not least, at tip number 5, there are some not so secret anymore vendors that you can still very well do some very profitable vendor flipping with. And first, and by far the best place to find these vendors, is the Storm Spire within the Netherstorm zone. And the reason is that there are actually a whole bunch of vendors here that either sell limited quantity items that are also valuable, or some unique items like pets and unique weapons. And because of this, the Storm Spire is an excellent place to park and all because of not only easy access to these vendors, but also being able to frequently check for some of the limited quantity items like herbs and even the elemental elemental moats, both of which are going to be extremely valuable at the beginning of the expansion. And for one more very notable limited quantity item vendor, we have this one here at the entrance of the Shadow Labyrinth, which is the southern portion of Arkindon. And this vendor sells the elemental moats in a limited quantity, so definitely don't pass them up if you're around the area. And that is pretty much all I wanted to show you in today's video. Like it if you liked it or found it helpful, and consider subscribing to my channel for more cutting edge videos about making gold in World of Warcraft. Thank you so much for watching, enjoy Burning Crusade Classic, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.